Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our May 27th Town Hall. Tonight, we're talking about advocating locally and effectively, and very honored to have a distinguished panel with us here tonight. As we get started, a few remarks off the top. Those of you that have been attending are very familiar with this. This is a safe place for educators to come together. We are nonpartisan. We do not get into conspiracy theories. We're not alarmist. We deal in facts, and we're trying to build constructive strategies to support all of you in advocating for education. We have a commitment to your privacy. We will not publish, share, or mention you by name or any other identifiable information in supporting you and your voice in advocating for public ed. And so with those things having been said, I'd like to introduce to you the panel. I'll go around as they appear on my screen. First of all, Jeff Charbonneau is the principal of Zillow Washington High School, the 2013 U.S. National Teacher of the Year. He serves as the state coordinator for the National Association of Secondary School Principals, and he's a member of the Board of Trustees for Central Washington University. Jeff, if there's nothing else that's great about these panels, you get to have all your accolades announced to everybody. So we're honored to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you much. I can't say thank you enough for letting me be here tonight. I'll also say I'm one of the most overrated teachers when I get introduced that way. I got to be honest with you. We're all just living the work the same as anybody else. But thank you for letting me be a part of this.
So honored to have you. Susan Brooks-Young is an original town hall panelist. You know, you've seen her on past town halls, an author, an advocate, a former teacher, principal, cadre member from Project TICAL. Is that TICAL or TCAL?
TCAL.
TCAL, thank you. With the California Department of Education. She's an avid proponent for what's best for children, for healthcare, for the rights we all have as citizens. Susan, welcome.
Thank you very much. And I'm coming to you today from Bremerton, Washington, which is kind of a hop, skip, and a jump from Jeff. I suppose I could get on a plane to get there. But it's lovely to have an opportunity to be with you all again this afternoon, and I can't wait to have a good conversation with you.
It is all about connecting. You got that right. Lauren Jewett is a special education teacher for the Orleans Parish Schools in Louisiana. She's a member of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee there, a Jefferson Parish Democratic Executive Committee, and she's run for the Louisiana Board of Education and the Jefferson Parish School Board. Lauren, it is so good to see you, and we are so honored to have you with us.
Thanks for having me tonight.
Absolutely. And Kathleen McClaskey, one of the co-founders of our town hall movement, the CEO of Empower the Learner and founder of Making Learning Personal. She hails from New Hampshire, co-author of Making Learning Personal and How to Personalize Learning, and she works to expand our influence as professionals and build our capacity as advocates. Kathleen, always great to have you with us.
Thank you, Walter. It's great to be here and to talk about advocacy. Just make a note that I'm the advocacy chair of the New Hampshire Society for Technology and Education. I've been doing that work for about 20 years.
Absolutely. And you bring so much value to these conversations. So we're talking about local advocacy. So let's kind of kick things off and let everyone get to know you by saying, what is your experience being an advocate for education at the local level? Well, how would you introduce yourself in that way? And Jeff, since we're going in a circle, let's start with you.
Well, thank you, Walter. I think the big thing to remember when anytime we're talking about advocacy, really all we're talking about is being an educator, being a teacher first. Like that comes up first and foremost. We're going to advocate for our kids. And one of the things that I've become kind of well known for in my region of the state is college and high school advocacy, making sure that students getting access to college and high school. And we can go down that route a little bit more. But when I first started advocating for college and high school and for some other programs, I suddenly realized I was doing it all wrong, that I was forgetting to be an educator first. You see, when you start treating everyone around you like they're your students when it comes to advocacy, you're actually going to go a lot further, a lot faster. When I first went over to the state legislature to ask for things, people would tell me all the time, hey, go tell this person what to think. Go tell this person what to do. Well, the problem is in our own classrooms, when we tell our kids what to do, they don't do it. But when we teach them, they do. So what does that mean for advocacy's standpoint? Think of it like the teacher. If you're going to go in and help a student, then you're going to learn about that student first. You're going to learn about their backgrounds, their motivators, their limitations, their successes. And then you're going to think about where you want to get that person to, where you want to get that student to be in terms of standards or otherwise. And you're going to develop a lesson plan for them. So do that with your advocacy. Treat your superintendent like a student. Learn about what the superintendent needs, learn about the stresses that they have, learn about the things that are on their plates, the things that are weighing them down, and then develop a lesson plan to help them see why your vision is a little bit maybe more correct than theirs is, right? That really to me is advocacy in a nutshell. Treat those around you like they're your students, because that's actually a really respectful way to treat people. See, I treat my students way better than I treat anybody else because I take time to get to know them, learn about them, and help them to be successful. So that's what local advocacy means to me, but I don't want to take all the airtime. I want to make sure I get to learn from other people too.
Well, that's wonderful. And, it's so true. If we stay in educator mode where we're comfortable, then it doesn't seem as daunting. We're not expected to be Joe Lobbyist and just come out with all kinds of mad skills that we haven't learned along the way. We can speak from the heart.
100%.
Thank you for, yeah, that kicks off the whole evening with a great place to start. Thank you. Lauren, how about from your viewpoint?
Yeah. So I look at, well, the word advocate, right? It's a noun, but it's a verb, right? So you advocate, right? That's the action of going and trying to stand up and be empowered, and empower other people, but then you embody that, right? As the noun, like the person who is the advocate. And so I definitely do a lot of the same things that Jeff does. I ran for office, and so I had to look at what I was doing from an educator standpoint, and use my educator skill sets to help promote my message, and teach other people about the process of what I was going through. And I knocked on a lot of doors. I talked to voters, and helped them understand what their rights were, what the election dates were for the upcoming election, that they could even vote for school board, because some people didn't realize they could do that. So I was trying to make the act of being involved electorally an educational lesson in a sense. And I've continued to do that by providing that information to people in my community about when we have elections, because we actually have a lot of elections in our state, when the early voting is, what it looks like to go and register to vote, what all those kind of demystifying things and breaking it down. I'm a special education teacher, so I understand that people need things in more bite-size chunks. Even adults need that. And also, like Jeff was saying, like treating your superintendent, right? Like teaching them. We have to teach our legislators things too, because our legislators, whether we agree with them or we disagree with them on certain things, not every legislator has been a teacher in a classroom. Everybody has sat in a classroom, but that doesn't always make them qualified to make policies on education. But they should be listening to the people who work with kids all day. And so I think I told this to you the other day, Walter, is that I don't expect my legislators to be experts on everything, but I do expect them to have humility and know who to ask for insight onto the different things that they're making policy on, is particularly education. And also understanding, like, voters or legislators are also people we can learn from. So like if we're teaching somebody or we're treating someone like a student, we should also be open-minded to know that we can learn from them too. And that listening is very important. Like I always made sure I was listening to voters when I went to go ask for their vote, and like thinking about what their concerns were, because that made my advocacy better, because I could understand what their pain points were.
I love the idea that advocacy is educating stakeholders. That feels so user-friendly, and it's such an easy point of reference. Susan, when you think about it, what has been your experience?
I'm going to riff off both Jeff and Lauren.
Please.
In the olden days, when the word advocacy or advocate was used for me as a classroom teacher or as a site administrator, often immediately I thought about doing a better job of telling our story. Educators do not do a good job talking about what they do and how it works and why it works. We're so busy hiding our light under a bushel that we often end up extinguishing it rather than simply covering it up. So that was one of the things I worked on a lot, and particularly because the last school where I was an administrator had the reputation of being the place that teachers were sent to decide to resign.
Ah,
And I wanted to change that. I wanted
yeah.
that to be the school that teachers asked to transfer to. And before I left, that's what it had become. But it took not just me, it took a lot of work with a lot of people.
Of course.
But now, living where I do in Washington on Kitsap Peninsula,
Yes.
home of two of the founders of Moms for Liberty,
Wow.
my point of view about advocacy has changed. And one reason I didn't even
Ah,
check in today until 2 minutes before starting time
yeah.
was because I have been working to do a lot of what Lauren was talking about. I'm not running for anything,
Okay.
but I am working to help educate our community. So I work with a group that sets up what we call Meet the Candidate events.
Ah,
And we invite people running for various offices. Washington is a state that has off-year elections, odd years. And so this year we're having elections for city positions, county positions, school
Mhm.
boards, ports, all kinds of different district sorts of things.
yeah.
And one of the Meet the Candidate nights we're going to have is going to be an opportunity for people who are running for school board to meet with this group, and they each get 15 to 20 minutes to do whatever they want to with it. And I got to tell you, it is the most eye-opening experience I have
Yeah.
ever had. And Lauren, you'll probably appreciate this. They can talk the whole time. They can take questions the whole time. They can do something in between.
Yeah.
They can get on a piano and sing a ballad if they want. I don't care what they do, but they have to do it in the 15 to 20-minute time allotment. And every year, we've done this 5 or 6 years now, we have people leave, or they come in thinking they know who they're going to vote for, and they walk out having made the decision they're voting for somebody else entirely. Because when you give a politician 20 minutes to do whatever they want to do, they don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
It is, it really is. And so
But teachers know what to do with 20 minutes.
They
That's
do.
right.
They do,
That's
but
right.
many of them are not running for any of these offices.
Good.
Yeah, but but it really has been, I now get candidates calling me ahead of time to say, when are you doing this and can I be part of it?
Yeah.
And we have members of the community also wanting to know when we're going to be doing this because they want to be there. And that's what
Wonderful.
advocacy recently has become for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably post-pandemic, we appreciate all this more
Mhm.
because there was a while there you couldn't be face to face, and it was harder to get information. So yes, I
Yeah.
think there's a resurgence, and Susan, you describe it brilliantly.
Oh, thank
Now,
you.
Kathleen and I hail from New England, where the whole town hall concept started.
That's right.
And, it's just a smaller part of the country. So you know a lot more of your constituents.
Right.
Teachers know their community and vice versa. Kathleen, what do you say when you're asked, what does local advocacy mean in New Hampshire?
Well, local advocacy in New Hampshire, just remember that we all have, it's all local controlled here.
Right.
We vote on our budgets, we vote on our candidates, we do that every single year. So if you don't like the budget, whether it be the school or the district budget, you can vote it out. But you can also attend meetings about any kind of warrant articles that are being presented.
Yep.
And so it's all very public, the whole process, and it's done every single year. So that's really, I think, unique to New Hampshire. The other thing that's really unique is that we have a very large legislature. There's like probably like 4 representatives. I live in a town of about 12,000 people, and we have like 4 representatives just from this town. Okay.
Wow.
So, and then of course the senatorial side, it's more regional, but we have like 435 representatives in a very small state.
Wow.
One of the things here, and I kind of want to bring this up because this is something that's really happening on a national basis, as well as this whole piece around vouchers for private schools or for homeschoolers. And that has become a major issue here in New Hampshire. Just want to say to you is that we actually support our schools. Like 90% of our taxes go to schools, our property tax. The state does a very small percentage. Okay, we don't have a state tax, by the way, or a sales tax. So anyway, I mean an income tax. We don't have an income tax or the state tax. So again, everything's locally controlled, and the vouchers are really becoming a major issue. And by the way, even at the national level, that whole piece is actually, the piece of vouchers is actually in federal legislation right now. Okay. Yep. So everyone should really be aware of that. And so I belong to an organization here in the state. And one other thing I want to say is that when you're advocating locally, it really helps to really be associated with an organization so that you either represent them or you are representing a larger number of people, and that helps a lot. The other thing is be totally prepared on the topic that you're about to discuss with the legislator, and become the resource for that legislator. Meet with them, schedule a meeting or at least call them and speak with them, because who else do we have but the population, and really to contact representatives over issues that they believe in. And as I said, it's much easier here because people could be your neighbor. Okay, a representative could be your neighbor. So
it's true, and it becomes all about relationships, and I hope that's one of the things that will come out tonight. Is you can be the smartest person in the room, but if you haven't taken time to build those relationships, you're going to miss having the impact that you're hoping to have. So important. So a follow-up question, and hopefully a fun one. When you're thinking about your experience as advocates, what's a favorite success story? Maybe a story you tell in yourself, maybe a lesson learned from over time as you grew into this role. And Jeff, let's start at the top with you again.
Yeah, I'd probably get made fun of by my friends if I didn't mention college and high school, of course, because that's really been something I've worked on for a long time. So let me just take you through the advocacy route, and I promise to keep this 3 minutes or less. We'll try here.
You're fine.
So classroom teacher for 17 years, taught chemistry, physics, engineering, robotics. Basically, I really liked toys, right? Because the science teachers, we get all the fun stuff. And I saw that my students were not excelling to the level I wanted to. So instead of dropping the rigor of my classes, made my classes harder and harder and harder. And that story is replicated all across our nation in lots of different places, right? People are doing this fantastic work. And I caught on in Washington State many years ago to this idea of college and the high school. So this is back in, like, say, 2007, 2008 or so. But the problem at that point in time is that you had to have a master's degree in subject area for the most part to be able to offer a college and a high school class, because you had to be, get endorsed in those areas. But you also, the students had to pay for it. And that was at a much reduced rate, but students were rewarded with great academic rigor in high school. They were rewarded with a bill, right? With a monetary cost to it. Yeah. And that's not okay in a school where we're 70% free and reduced price lunch, right? So we saw this tremendous equity gap, students taking the classes, not receiving the credit. Yeah. So the advocacy work kicks in. So everything that you've heard about with advocacy so far from the entire panel is just fantastic nuggets of information. You need to meet with your legislators, but you need to meet with your legislators not on in the middle of session. Just like your students, you're going to treat your legislators like your students, right? You're not going to start teaching your student on test day. The session is test day. right? That's when all the bills come to a head and they've got to make their final decisions. You're going to teach them when you first get them in class. And guess what? They're already in your class, right? You already know who they are. You know how to reach them. You know how to contact them. And it's really as simple as sending off an email, right? It
Yeah.
really can be that simple. I have been shocked at how many legislators I send an email to, and then guess what? They write you back.
Yeah.
One, tells me that they do want to know things, right?
Yeah.
Two, they're not getting that many emails. I mean, they're getting plenty, but they've got people and staff members to work through these things. So they are
Yeah.
going to connect with you. So if we connect with them early, we do that advocacy work. But the second part is it's going to take time. Just like that third grader who is behind academically, is not reading on grade level, is going to take some time to get them up to speed. Now, some of us are amazing educators, and we're going to get that third grader up to speed real fast because that third grader is in a time and place where they can. But other
Yeah.
third graders are not in that time and place, just like some of our legislators are not in the time and place to hear your advocacy. And so it's going to take a long time. So I started my advocacy work in 2007. It really did not culminate until 2 years ago, and I keep this above my monitor, until 2 years ago when this pen was used to sign the legislation by then Governor Jay Inslee that put
Yeah.
Senate Bill 5048 into
Yeah.
law. I was
Yeah.
there for the bill signing when it was finally done, making all college and high school free for all students in Washington State, right? That took,
Wonderful.
but that, remember, I was talking about 2007 or so, and it was just
Right.
2 years ago when that came
Yep.
to fruition. Well,
Yep.
2007 until about 2023, guess what? That's about the amount of time it takes us to teach a kid, right? Over the course of their schooling, right? So this
Yeah.
this analogy I can't stress enough, because as teachers, you are doing advocacy every day when a student walks into your classroom and you are advocating for the value of education. You're advocating for the value of the content that you're teaching or the skills that you're teaching that student. Take those same exact skills and translate them over to your building administrators, to your legislators, to the rest. And amazing stuff can happen. Now, the other part about this, and I think it was both Kathleen and maybe Sarah or Susan touched on just a little bit. This was not by myself. Absolutely not by myself.
That's right.
There were so many different organizations that I became a member of or had to work in partnership with. I was one of only about 100, maybe 150 different people that worked
Yeah.
on advocacy towards this bill on the regular, in addition to the other 1,000 or so folks that would chime in from time to time.
Yeah.
So you on your own are not going to be the only one being the advocate. You need to connect with others. You need to amplify your voice. You need to make sure to bring other folks in on that. Walter, I think I went over my 3 minutes, but that's the key, right? Work together on these things, and you can push this. You really can.
Totally valuable.
Yeah.
Just totally valuable. Thank you, Jeff. And
Yeah.
so proud of the work you've done. Just a great role model. Thank you.
Hey,
Lauren.
I gotta be just one more
Oh,
nugget.
please. Yeah.
I just gotta say, somebody mentioned budget.
Yes.
Don't let the budget stop you. There is both a ton of money in education and no money in education at exactly the same time. There is enough money to do any program out there. There's enough money in your district to make that happen. But there's not enough money to fund your program and the other program and the other program and the other program. So you have to do your research as well to find out what the other programs are that you're competing with for funding, so that you can talk intelligently about why the program you're advocating for is so much more important than maybe some other ones. So sorry, I'll stop there.
Love that. No. Nuggets. Thank you. Lauren, coming from Louisiana, talk to us. Some favorite success stories, lessons learned.
I mean, I think I have a lot of different things I could share or point to. But I kind of got into advocacy, I would say, because I've been a union member my entire career. I've
Yeah.
been teaching for 16 years. My grandmother was president of her union, like it's 'cause it's in my blood. But
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in Louisiana. I grew up in New York. So I moved here. I never like had been to New Orleans when I moved here, and um I learned from my union like what the work that had been done. And it was difficult work because we were one of the first unions to get collective bargaining in the Deep South. and that work was done very intentionally, but also with like a lot of pushback, and also like pushback that had like, because they were so powerful, they lost a lot of those rights like post Katrina. And so I joined that organization, and I was able to learn like from that spirit of advocacy um and that work. And I think the work that I'd done with my union helped me understand that, like Jeff was saying, like we can't do this alone. Advocacy would be a very lonely road, and a short road if we did it by ourselves.
Yes.
Our strength is is our solidarity with each other. It is also building coalitions with other groups to
Yeah.
get things done and get things accomplished, whether that's at a city council level, at a school board level, at a legislative level. We have to do work with other groups. And I'll say, within my union, like for a long time, I did a lot of political work. That's how I learned about how campaigns run. I worked on campaigns. I worked on doing the endorsement interviews for candidates. And so I saw the strengths and the disadvantages that candidates like had to deal with. And that really formed my own candidacy. Like I like learned
Sure.
lessons from working on those campaigns and seeing candidates come through every cycle. And I would say during COVID was when I like really I felt probably had to step into my advocacy a little bit more, because
Yeah.
um, we have a different structure of the way our schools are run down here. I actually work at the only publicly direct run school that just opened again this year.
Wow.
But we have an entire decentralized system of charter schools in New Orleans. And so each school has to organize essentially if they want any kind of union recognition from their charter school board. And there was a time, and I think there still is, like people don't want to out themselves as union members because we are a right to work state.
Yeah.
People were fear of retribution and retaliation. And so during COVID, we were getting a lot of requests from media calling up our union office asking for insights from educators, a statement on reopening plans or different things that we're moving through the state, vaccines, and just different policies around COVID. And so we were
Yeah.
those requests, and some of our people on our council like didn't feel like they wanted to be interviewed by the news. And then it was hard to find people who would just be in our membership in general who wanted to like again be on the news and be very public. And I was just
Right.
like, I don't care, I'll do it. So I was starting to do a lot of interviews on the news and work with the comms team at our state level to help, answer these questions from reporters. And a lot of my interviews were on Zoom at the time. And so my face was out there, and I felt like I had to kind of be a little bit of a spokesperson. And when you get news interviews, if anyone's been on the news, like those requests come real quick, and the turnaround time is like, oh, someone wants to like interview us in the next 2 hours. And so
Right.
you had to be like pretty much camera ready
Yeah.
to do those interviews. But I felt like I was willing to do that, but I like wasn't doing it by myself. I had people behind me like who I was trying to help get the message out of like this is what it feels like to be a teacher in the classroom during COVID. I think Susan was talking about telling our stories. And
Yes.
I always feel like if we don't tell our own narratives and stories, someone else is going to set it for us.
Yep.
And we know that
That's
has
right.
been. And so I think our voices constantly have to be in the conversation because other people are going to be telling our stories for us. And like we have to reclaim the agency. And we're the ones to tell it best. And you have to do it really quickly on the news because it's like little
Yeah.
sound bites. But
Right.
I do think that that's it, that was an impactful like advocacy memory that I have. And also just that this work is not like we know as educators, it can take a long time for things to move, like and
Yeah.
things to change. So you have to also like understand that like it's a marathon, not a sprint, and like movement building work and building those coalitions, like it's messy and it's long. And
Yeah.
so you have to like really have a good amount of discipline and strength to get through it. And so that's why you have to have other people with you, because sometimes you have to tap out so
Right.
someone else can tap in.
Yeah, wonderful,
Yes,
wonderful
good point.
perspective. Susan, for you, when you hear us talking about being attached to organizations and building coalitions, what does that look like for you in your career?
Oh, I'm just going to spin off on something else, Walter.
Please.
I throughout my teaching career, I started off teaching Head Start preschool.
Uh,
And then I taught elementary, middle school, was an administrator at those levels, did some high school stuff, some university stuff.
mhm.
But the one thing that I learned that was really important, and it had nothing to do with elections or telling our stories to the newspapers or any of that stuff. It was first and foremost, particularly often with the populations I was working with, I had to be an advocate for those kids.
Right.
So many people viewed them as being empty vessels that were just waiting to be filled.
Yeah.
And that was not at all
No.
what they are. And I mean, those kids that I worked with may not have known a lot of what was on in the curriculum, but they knew a lot of stuff. They knew how to get mom or dad's paycheck if they got a check. A lot of times it was just cash under the table. But if they got a check, they knew how to go through the worst part of town at night with that check, get it cashed, and get it back home without getting robbed.
Wow.
I mean, that's not a skill I ever aspired for my own children to learn, but that was something they knew. And
Yeah.
so that kid who was kind of a flake in class,
Mhm.
when I learned more about the things that kid knew how to do, then it became more, how do I tap into what this person can do, than always set that person up for failure because they can't do what some book publishing company somewhere says they have to be able to do.
Amen.
And so I'll go back to that last school where it was a very high poverty area.
Yeah.
And it was a throwaway school.
Mhm.
I think I may have mentioned to you before, the superintendent just said to me, basically, I don't care what you do as long as you're not on the front page of the paper.
Wow.
Go for it.
Yeah.
And what became the first thing for me to do was to advocate for that student population, for themselves to see that they had value, for their families to see that they had value. I was told not to go out into the neighborhood where the school was because it was too dangerous.
Mm.
So of course, the first thing I did was go out into the neighborhood and start knocking on doors.
Yeah.
And a lot of the parents were Spanish speakers, and my Spanish is not great. So I
Right.
would grab somebody to go with me.
Yeah.
And we would just go knock on doors, and I would introduce myself, and I would invite them to come to school, and just say, we value you, we want you here, and you are an important part of your child's life. And we went from having a maintenance man on campus 2 days a week
Mhm.
to take care of the damage that was being done on that campus on a regular basis, to the guy coming to me one day and saying, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm changing light bulbs now because they've burned out, not because they were shot out.
Wow.
And and it wasn't, again, it was not just me. If the teachers had not bought into
Right.
this, if the parents had not bought into this, it would not have happened. But because everybody was like at a point where they wanted to hear that message about their kids being worthwhile and their students
Yes.
being worthwhile, and
Yeah.
how we could come together and make things be different instead of continuing to go on in the same old patterns that had not been terribly successful. um, it made a huge difference. And that's why at the end, teachers were asking to transfer in
Sure,
instead
of
of
course.
wanting to leave. And so, I mean, I could go on the rest of the afternoon and into the evening telling you all the different things that happened there because it was amazing and awesome because I was in the right place at the right time with the right people.
Well, and a wonderful story. And I can say that for all of you. I
Well,
mean, an hour does not do this justice, but
Mhm.
you're giving such a sense across a span of careers how you're all having impact. So thank you for that. Kathleen, organizations and connectedness and success you've had.
right. Well, let me just say, I think, I've had quite a bit of success in this advocacy work, and
Mhm.
you develop a lot of confidence in advocacy if you're prepared. Because when you go to speak on a subject or a topic related to education, I mean, you have to be prepared and well versed
Yeah,
if you're going to advocate for that. Then you have to be willing to follow up with whoever you just spoke with. Okay, you have to be able to send them materials or whatever that's going to help them understand or help them advocate for a
yeah,
bill or whatever. But
yeah,
all of those things are very important. One of the most important some of the work that I've done is this whole piece around self advocacy and for
yes,
kids to be able to self advocate. Okay. We don't talk a lot about this, but it's probably the most important skill that we could ever give any child at any time. Because at some point in time, they're going to walk out the schoolhouse door and they have to be able to self advocate going forward. And
yeah,
having them do that is very important and actually does lead to advocacy, you see, because if they can advocate for themselves, then they'll feel confident to even advocate for issues. Okay. And I'm not too sure where all of this, came from, but I will tell you that I'm the product of the 60s.
yeah,
And I had a history teacher back in 1960 who got us to debate about issues, right?
yeah, yeah,
And this is where that sort of sparked, well, if I can, advocate for something I believe in, whether it be an issue or maybe it's a policy, a piece of legislation,
mhm,
then you can learn to advocate for lots of different things, you see. And but one of the most important things is when you go to advocate, is it's great when you belong to an organization that supports you at this. Okay.
yeah.
That's one of the things that I've learned, um, and just again keep that communication going between you and a legislator or whoever that happens to be. Could be a school board member that there's an issue in town and you want to be able to talk about it,
Yeah.
but just be prepared. Okay,
Right.
when you do that.
So true. So true.
So,
And you're all such naturals that as you share yourselves, even me sitting here, it's like, this is easy. This can be done. We're already teachers. So it's a
that's right.
logical next step. So, but we also know this is our fifth full month of doing town halls that people are reticent. People aren't just jumping out there and putting on their capes and saying, I'm ready. I've been waiting to do this all my life. So, maybe not such an easy question. We'll see. How do you tell people to get started? If I'm a classroom teacher, if I'm a building administrator, or if I'm even working at the district level, and I feel that push, especially in this time of disruption, I need to speak up. I can't just be quiet about. I need to say what's best for kids. Where do you start? What are those first steps? Jeff, what would you tell someone sitting right there next to you having a conversation?
Yeah, I think I think this can be broken down, right, into some very digestible, easy first steps. And I think you
Yeah.
actually heard some of it if we dissect a little bit of what we just heard. Susan showed us something brilliant, by the way, I want to point out.
Yeah.
When you asked her a question, guess what? She chose to answer whatever she wanted, right?
There
So
you
if you
go.
ever get interviewed by somebody or you're talking to a legislator and they try to take you one way, guess what? You can't retain the power, to speak however you want. Um,
Amen.
but it's not just about legislation. So many times I talk to folks about advocacy and they want to learn how to be an advocate, but that doesn't mean that you have to get legislation passed. You might
Right,
just be doing advocacy for a $500 project in your classroom, and that
right,
is a barrier enough. right?
Yeah.
Advocacy is at all levels and is just as important. So, Walter, you teed me up. I've talked about this a lot. Okay, here's your homework, everybody. You got 6 things you got to do. Okay, 6 things to do. Number one, I want people to write down what is one impact that they want to have this next school year. Just start there. Just start with your quick mission statement. What is the one impact you want to have? And maybe you're going to do a deep dive again on third grade special education resources in your classroom. Or maybe you're looking at new field trips for the seventh grade state history class, and you want to go see the Capitol, right? Or something. What is the one impact that you're going to have this year? Number two, you got to give 2 reasons why you believe that's your role, right? Why are you uniquely qualified? Why are you the one to take this on? And that's important. It was mentioned earlier that far too many times we take on the humble servant role. Well, we downplay our skill set. We downplay who we are. Educators, we have at least a bachelor's degree, oftentimes a master's degree, oftentimes credits beyond that. If we were in any other field, we'd have, a list of letters after our name, like crazy, but we humble ourselves. So 2 reasons why you believe you are uniquely qualified to be the one working on that. And that's really just to lift you up, to give yourself some momentum here. 3, you got to have at least 3 ways that you would see success happening, because there's going to be your goal, there's going to be your stretch goal, right? And then there's going to be I still know that I made progress, if. And maybe this year, I know I made progress if I at least gained awareness around this issue. And in year 1, that's okay, right? We got to the awareness phase before we get to full implementation phase, before we get to the stretch goal. So 3 different ways that you can have that impact. Then you're going to write down 4 different resources that you need that you don't currently have, and you're not allowed to say money. You're not allowed to write money. Because if you go to somebody and you just ask for money, then they do not see your vision. I used to run a robotics program when I was a teacher, and I wanted to expand this statewide, and I want to provide robot kits for other schools that didn't have accessibility to that. If I asked for money, I got turned down. But if I asked them to buy me a robot kit, I had money coming out of everywhere, right? You got to give them the vision. Don't ever ask for money.
Right.
Ask for the stuff that you actually need. Okay, so 4 resources that you need. And then we've heard it said by almost everybody here. It's not you by yourself. So you're going to write down 5 contacts, 5 people or organizations that you are going to contact that are probably already doing this work, that probably have some resources for you, or are ready to come on board when a new leader emerges, right? Yes. And there's tons of them out there, So 5 different folks that you're going to reach out to. Then when you're all done with that, you're up to step number 6. Do it. Just start. Right? Actually follow through with that plan that you just created. And it really is as simple as starting with, all right, what's the impact I'm going to have? How am I going to make this happen? Am I uniquely qualified for this? Or how am I going to navigate these resources together? So there's your steps. Anybody can do this work. We have an amazing panel here of representatives of education advocates all over, right? And people are doing this work, and the people watching this can do it too.
Just amazing. And those of you that have been with us in the past, this isn't scripted. Jeff had no idea I was going to tee that up. He hit it out of the park. 6 steps, bam. Thank you, sir. You were ready. Lauren, talk to us. Well, how would you say, as a classroom teacher, how do you get started? Whatever started looks like.
I was on mute, sorry.
Yeah. You're fine.
I mean, I think that you have to start small, and I feel like you can't look at this like something that's impossible. And I think I know that it can seem scary, and that there are I mean, I ran for office. That's a very high
yes.
Risk kind of thing, but I didn't just wake up and say I was going to run for office. I started the advocacy, like I shared, by doing certain things within organizations locally, and getting my feet wet with those sorts of tasks. And so I liked how Jeff broke down and
yes.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I guess my tips for educators who are looking to hone in their advocacy skills, because we are all advocates, whether it's doing something small or doing something big,
Yeah.
is like, first of all, and we talked about it before, is like knowing your story, practicing your story, refining that story, like practicing it.
Yes.
Like an elevator pitch, I know that sounds kind of like
Mhm.
a little bit maybe contrived, but like you have to understand that like we as humans have shared stories throughout generations, and like that's how we find connection. And a lot of this advocacy work is heart and it's heart and mind work.
Yeah.
And that's how you get
Mhm.
to people, is by sharing stories, because that's where we can see where we're connected, even if it's somebody who doesn't have the same necessarily viewpoints as you. And then I would also say like identify what your passions are. Like my passions are obviously like advocating for kids that often like aren't included, because I work with students with disabilities. I want to stand up for access and equity for them, and making sure that not just our kids, but our teachers who are neurodivergent, like also feel like welcomed in workplaces, and school settings. So find what your passions are. Like think about,
Mhm.
what those are and write those down. And like what are groups that you can connect with that identify with your passions. Like if you want to advocate for culturally responsive teaching, think about what who you could connect with in your school building, or what organization will help uplift that. Maybe it's arts programming in your schools. Like what are the things that are you're passionate about, and then what groups can help you like understand more. Um, Connecting and like thinking about how you can research education policies and legislation, and keep up to date with those things. There's different policies, there's procedures, there's regulations, there's laws, all those things affect education. And what I tell educators who may not like really want to get involved with that, or say like I don't do politics, well, I say politics is going to do you. So like
Thank
you
you.
need to
Right.
understand like what is
Good
happening,
point.
like because like what's happening in the state house is going to have like come right down and trickle down to the schoolhouse. So understand like how these policies are affecting you in the classroom. Like if like for example, I have to spend part of my summer doing like a mandated numeracy training for math because I work with grades 4 through 8. Well, people were like saying, "Oh, I got to do this training," and like it's taking so much time. I said, "Well, the legislators passed it. So like if it was passed and it was an unfunded mandate, like that's stuff that we're having to do outside of our personal time." Um, and then again, attending meetings about education issues. Those don't necessarily have to be going up to your state capitol, because that might not be accessible. Your state legislature might meet during the school year. Like ours
Yeah.
has been meeting and it only has 2 more weeks. So it's very hard for educators to get up there. But you could go to a local board meeting. You could just go to a
Right.
community town hall. You could go to your school building level meetings, a PTA meeting. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be like that, like
Right.
high level. Um,
Right.
Keep in contact with your state, or local officials. Be informed about voting. I talked about that. Writing an
Yep.
op-ed or a blog to get your voice out there is a really
Yep.
great way if you don't want to get on camera.
Right. Right.
And then just like I said before, network and build coalitions, and like think about running for office, because I think we need more educators in policy
Mhm.
making decisions.
Right.
I
Here,
truly
here.
Well,
It's so true. It's so true. Susan, we're coming up to the last 10 minutes. Want to make sure Susan and Kathleen are able to share wisdom here.
Well,
Susan,
sure.
what's your take?
I
Yes, please.
I don't know how much wisdom it is, and I'll just once again I'll just diverge off into
Please.
something else. I don't know how y'all decided you wanted to be teachers. My decision was based on a couple of things. One, I did not want to be a cocktail waitress the rest of my life. And two, I did not want to draw maps for the rest of my life either. Those were the two jobs that I had
Yeah.
prior to going into that Head Start classroom.
Yeah.
So I just and in part I was avoiding it because I was the child of teachers. And
Hmm.
I thought if I make one more bulletin board, I am going to commit mayhem. And I was making that decision like at the ripe old age of 16.
Right.
So I stumbled into education more because I knew what I didn't want to do than because I knew what I did want to do. And I don't recommend that as necessarily being the best approach to making that kind of career decision. But there I was with a teaching credential and a classroom full of kids. And it took me a while. I wish I could say I had this amazing revelation and I got my act together. And within a year, I was like absolutely the best teacher on the planet. That didn't
Right.
happen.
No.
It took time. It took a lot of trial and error stuff. But what I think it really took at the end of the day was me finally being able to articulate, why had I stuck around? Why didn't I quit my job
Yeah.
when I was struggling those first years? What
Yeah.
was it that kept me there? And it wasn't until I could really talk about the why that I could then begin to think about, how do I advocate for these kids?
Yeah.
How do I ensure that they are getting the best shot they possibly can
Yeah.
in the time that I have with them? What are the kinds of things I would want to do in order to be able to help facilitate that?
Right.
So for me, it was really almost, I laughed when Kathleen said something about being a child of the 60s, me too, but it was sort of that kind of personal, you know, learning journey. I was not out in the desert chewing peyote buttons, but I was definitely going through that process of really figuring out who I was, because once I knew I had a better handle on that,
Yep.
then I had a handle on what I would and could do for kids and how much of myself I was willing to put on the line for them. So I'll
So
stop there.
powerful. Thank you. That's so powerful. Susan, you never disappoint. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen, please.
Well, this is giving me lots of thought. So I'll just give you just a little bit of history.
Yeah.
So before, I became an advocate for this organization, I actually advocated for my own children. And I have two children that are neurodivergent learners.
Yeah.
And I was a huge advocate and showed up at all the special ed meetings and advocated for what they needed to be successful in school. So I advocated from 1986 till 2001
Yeah.
for my children first. So that advocacy work was probably the most important work that I've ever done. But if somebody was just starting off and wanted something that they wanted to advocate for, is you have to ask yourself some questions. What do you believe about this, right? About what you're about to advocate for.
Right.
And why do you believe it, right?
Yep.
Because you have to come across pretty sincere when you go
Yeah.
to advocate. You really have to be believable. And so that's probably the most important thing when you go to advocate. So if you're an educator or a parent, believing and knowing how to advocate is very important. And having a plan. I have to really say that the most important, Lauren, when you were talking, I was thinking about how you really need to have a plan, right? When you go to advocate. And there's a very famous quote that says, a goal without a plan is only a wish. Okay. I would say this to children over and over, what's your goal? Well, what's your plan? Right. So have a plan. And be believable, be very well versed about what you're about to do or say or what you're about to advocate for. because you can't go in there cold. I'll tell you that. And then build a relationship with, my thing is building relationship with legislators. And when I do this work at the federal level, believe it or not, these people actually recognize you. They want to listen to you. And then you can communicate with them on email. So build that relationship, and always give them a way for them to contact you about something they may need.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the work I've done for quite a long time. But when you were talking about, advocating for children, Susan, I was thinking about my own kids, and so some of the work I've done over the last 20 years is to help kids advocate for themselves.
Yes.
Okay, how to be self-advocates, because
And
that really is the first step.
isn't that the greatest segue? You already advocate, whether it's your own kids or the kids in your classroom. And
Right.
so it's kind of a natural extension to say, well, I want to share that passion with stakeholders. I want to share it with decision makers.
Right.
And if it doesn't feel as high stakes when you're being your genuine self. And
Right.
Susan, you said that wonderfully, that you have to know yourself. Once you know yourself, then everything else becomes negotiable. So we have covered a lot of ground. Are there any last minute things that we haven't mentioned that anyone in the panel would like to add with the time we have left?
Well,
Jeff?
I'll throw one more out for you.
Yeah.
Just think about this for a second. In the United States of America, we have about 340 million people ish, right? About 340 million.
Mhm.
Depending on who you listen to and which numbers you look at, there's somewhere between 3.2 and 3.6 million public education teachers.
Yeah.
We literally are the 1%. Okay, they talk about the 1% or whatever.
Love that.
Public education teachers are about 1%. Building principals, about
Right.
92,000 building principals in the United States. Imagine for a second that all 3.2 to 3.6 million educators in the US started advocating positively about the power of public education.
Yeah.
Just
Mhm. Right.
imagine that for a second, the
Right.
impact that we would have, right? So for those of you that are thinking about starting your own advocacy work, just take that first step. It's small advocacy makes a tremendous, tremendous difference. That's what we need.
Mhm. Yeah.
Words of wisdom. Thank you. Lauren,
Mhm.
any last words?
I would just, go back to I'm a national board certified teacher, and we
Yeah.
follow something called 5 core propositions. And had the pleasure and fortune to attend an advocacy boot camp several years ago with the national board. And one thing that they did is they connected our 5 core propositions as teachers to like advocacy propositions. And so like
Ooh.
the five
Wow.
core proposition, like the first one is that teachers are committed to students and their learning. So like in translation, right, an advocate is like committed to making sure that we're like connecting to decision makers, but like also like helping influence them. And then like that we as teachers, we know our subjects, we know our content area, we know how to teach them. And in the same vein, like an advocate is going to know the issues.
Right.
They're going to know how to share data like in a like way that's concise and a way that's convincing. And then teachers are also responsible to manage and monitor our student learning. And then like, again, advocates need to know the data and the dollars that are needed, like for any
Right.
kind of policy.
Yeah.
Teachers think systematically about our practice, and we learn from like experience. And like as advocates, like we're gonna learn sometimes that we like go up there and we try to like convince somebody it doesn't work. So we're like learning from that experience and having to regroup.
Mhm.
And then lastly, like we're members of learning communities as teachers, and you also have to be a member of decision-making communities as an advocate.
Right.
Love that. What great parallels. So I can't thank you enough, panel. I know people are going to reach out and want to continue having conversations with you, and we would certainly love to have you back. Our next town hall is Monday, June 16th, and we're going to be unveiling the first of our 10 advocacy modules. We've been learning as we've been doing town halls that there's a number of skills that, you know, we need to make sure everybody has. And so these modules are going to be a great way to learn on your own time and your own schedule, completely free to educator. So looking forward to that, and I put the link in the chat box if you'd like to register. For now, I want to thank everybody who attended, everybody watching and recordings, and looking forward to continuing this important work. So on that note, we'll get this recording processed and get it out to everyone, and then look forward to continuing this important work together.